2000 by Ahoy. This guy always makes the best videos, man. Absolutely goated videos. Chainsaw, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I loved when he covered guns. The Glock one, I love that one. The MP40. MP40, by the way, best gun in World at War. Best gun. God, he's been doing it for such a long time, though. I respect it. I really respect it. I remember when he first started doing his videos, and people always said that he just sounded like Captain Price from COD. Like OG Captain Price, not the remake one.
2000 was...
What gun is the best gun? STG? STD? No, STG. Oh, yeah. That was actually the best gun in Warzone. The damage output was incredible.
Was an exciting year. It was 1990 no more, and a whole new millennium beckoned with potential. It was a transitional year for gaming too.
Oh my god, bro, Jet Set Radio. Holy crap. Have you guys heard of, like... Dude, the soundtrack and stuff is so good. The soundtrack for Jet Set Radio, man. Also, ignore how my recommended is just blatant echo. Shut up. Don't want to hear it.
A generation of consoles was coming to...
Oh my god, Time Splitters as well. Oh my god, I feel like I'm back in the retirement home. I'm an old man reminiscing of the past. I never played the original Time Splitters. Apparently it's actually really mid, but Time Splitters 2, holy cracked. They had this robot. Hang on. They had this robot in Time Splitters 2. When I was like a kid, when I was a little kid, I was literally simping over this character. It's one of the cover characters. Oh yeah, the funny robot. Yeah, the art design for Time Splitters was so good though. It was absolutely goated. I love the art style they had for that game. Phenomenal.
To an end, and the battlegrounds were littered with failed machines. The 3DO, the Sega Saturn, the Atari...
Okay, I never played these, by the way. I'm not that old.
Jaguar. It wasn't a console war. It was a massacre. Nintendo were still standing. Their N64 had found a family-friendly niche, particularly in the American market.
I remember when Nintendo would make like an M-rated game, it was just all people would talk about because it was just unheard of. Like when Perfect Dark came out on the N64, it was like, what? You kill people? And there's blood? You don't jump on their head and they fall off the screen?
Steady stream of Mario games helped, and 2000 gave us Paper Mario, Mario Tennis, and Mario Party 3. One of the biggest N64 releases was Zelda Majora's Mask, a follow-up to the hugely successful Ocarina of Time, and while Majora's Mask...
Dude, I played that once on someone's Switch, Majora's Mask. It is actually I really want to play that game at some point because it is so dark. It is like perfect. You know, everyone on TikTok is like, I want to be in a dark fantasy setting and not Dark Souls. Like Majora's Mask is really, really morbid. I think it's like the only Zelda game where like Ganon isn't the bad guy as well.
Didn't sell quite as well. It garnered critical acclaim and a cult following.
It didn't sell well because it scared the kids, unironically.
Another N64 classic.
Yeah, perfect.
Released perfect.
I never played it on the N64, but they remastered it on the Xbox 360. It was so good. And you could cheese all the enemies because it basically was like GoldenEye, but they would only target your chest. So if you were hiding behind cover, you could just shoot anyone and they could never get a hit on you.
Perfect Dark, a spiritual successor to GoldenEye.
Yeah,
it lacked the Bond license but didn't lack ambition. The game pushed the hardware to its limits.
That game was so good, man. Bring that out on Steam, please. I want to play that game.
The visuals were very impressive, but the frame rate less so.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo has never been good at frame rate, let's be real. Like, only now on the Switch 2, you're getting like 60 FPS, and the PS2 had that with Ratchet and Clank.
To other platforms, the N64 had relatively few releases, but the games that were released were generally of a height.
It's crazy how many good games aren't available on Steam. There's no games. There are some games, but there are no games.
Standard. It was the home of the big mascot games, like Banjo-Tooie, Kirby 64. But the biggest franchise at this time was Pokemon.
Wait, did Kirby just eat that guy? I thought Kirby spat them out like Yoshi.
In
I never played a Kirby game.
2000, Pokemon Stadium released in America and Europe.
That game is rigged, by the way, Pokemon Stadium. If you're playing against a sweat that knows every Pokemon type, it is impossible to beat them.
And quickly became the best-selling console game that year. It sold 1 million copies in its first month. The only thing that could outsell
Oh
Pokemon
man,
Stadium
oh my god, leave Bulbasaur
was Pokemon
alone,
Gold
bro.
and
What are you
Silver
doing?
For the Game Boy Color.
Leave him alone.
On its first day of release in Japan, it sold 1.4 million copies. In its first few weeks in the US, it sold 2.9 million. 12% of all video games sold this year were Pokemon titles. This was good for Nintendo, as they were facing strong competition in the console space. Mobile gaming was still in its infancy, and the only realistic option for handheld play was the Game Boy. Pokemon was huge, and so Nintendo dominated the handheld market. Nothing else came close to the sales of Gold and Silver, but there were a few.
I honestly think if Nintendo released a home console, not a portable one, like, you know, if it was a Switch but it didn't have the portability of the Switch handheld, they would probably still outsell Xbox.
The notable releases for the Game Boy Color. Metal Gear Solid was the handheld debut of the Metal Gear series. Wario Land 3 continued the handheld exclusive games featuring Wario. So, while Nintendo were buoyed by their handheld success, the N64 wasn't as secure in the market as they might have hoped. With a new generation looming, Nintendo were no doubt planning how to take on their...
Nintendo fans are too diehard. Nintendo could literally have a CEO pull up to someone's house, take a shit on their desk, and then the Nintendo consumer, instead of filing charges, would pick up the piece of shit, put it in a glass box, and have it on their mantelpiece, because they would feel graced that a Nintendo exec took a shit on their desk.
Biggest rival. 5 years into its life, the Sony PlayStation was still doing numbers.
$80 Mario Kart, by the way. I've never seen a Switch game that's gone on discount, ever. I'm sure there are cases, but I'll see like the original Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, and it's just still like $80.
It had outsold the N64 by a ratio of 2-1 and was dominant in the European and Japanese markets. Thanks to its popularity in Japan, CD-ROM stores...
They do go on discounts, 10% max. Oh my god. They knocked $8 off. I kneel.
...storage and support from Square, it was the place for JRPGs. Final Fantasy IX, Vagrant Story, and Dragon Quest VII all released this year.
Yeah, Vagrant Story, I heard, is like the most best-looking game graphically for the PS1. I just hear really good things about it.
In theory, the N64 was the more powerful platform, but hamstrung by cartridge size and memory latency, the PlayStation kept pace in the 3D stakes.
Yeah, I remember you could buy the expansion pack for the N64, which gave it a bit more RAM. So instead of getting like 2 FPS, you'd get 3. Also, Siphon Filter, oh my god. Goated game. It's so good. I'll be honest, I'm going to get shit on for this, man. I think Siphon Filter 2 is better than Metal Gear Solid on the PS1. I will be labeled as Bad Take Andy forever for saying that, but I think the game is just so much easier to pick up and play compared to Metal Gear Solid.
Third-person action games like Siphon Filter 2 were standard fare. First-person shooters like Medal of Honor Underground tapped into...
There was like a taser you can get in Siphon Filter, and you could literally just cook people alive. It's meant to be a non-lethal weapon, but if you keep the taser prong like inside them for more than 5 seconds, they just sit on fire.
...to the rising popularity of shooters on consoles.
Wait, let me see if I can pull up the Siphon Filter taser, actually. 1 second. It's so good. Oh, there's literally a guy doing a video on it from, like, the same level. Yeah, you can tell he's emulating this as well. Activate Windows, you brokey. What are you doing? Come on. I don't need to see you picking it up. Oh, here we go. Here comes the comedy. That's brutal, man. I like how they just set on fire as well. Like, how many volts is that? I swear they literally go black if you keep it held in for like 10 seconds. Just does a funny little roll afterwards as well. Yeah, that was funny. And then I think in Days Gone, the zombie game, they added the taser back in, and you can still do that because the Days Gone devs were the people that made Siphon Filter, like some of the old heads.
The textures were low res, the polygon count low, and the controls often clunky.
Graphics to die for. It's like that image you see of like the skeletons, and it's like the PlayStation can produce some mind-boggling effects.
But this was the generation.
You guys seen that? Hang on. PS1 mind-boggling effects, and it's just like yeah, there you go, just two poorly rendered skeletons. Mind-boggling effects, by the way. Crazy. We've come so far. Now we've got loot boxes
where 3D graphics
and battle passes
became the expected norm. 3D opened up the potential for new genres and allowed home consoles
I
to
played
offer
that.
arcade-like experiences.
Damn, that still actually looks so...
had established itself
That looks
as
so good, though. Like, for that being a PS1 game, that actually still holds up.
the home of driving games. It had Gran Turismo, after all. It had variety, too, from serious driving simulators like Colin...
Old graphics were so much better. Why do you think now, like, the indie scene is exploding with, like, PS1 style graphics and, like, old horror games and stuff? Like there's such a niche for it that AAA just don't want to touch.
McRae Rally 2.0 to the crime-fueled Driver 2. If you were a sports fan...
Driver is so funny, the original game, because in the original Driver, you have to complete this tutorial in under 60 seconds in a parking lot, where you have to do like so many different movements. You've got to do like donuts, a 180 turn, an emergency stop, a handbrake. There's like 18 things you need to do in under a minute. And apparently the devs realized, oh shit, we didn't actually... Apparently that the timer is locked on hard mode, no matter what difficulty you're playing on. So loads of people, when they were kids, they bought Driver and they got filtered by the tutorial mission. So they could just never like go... I mean, hang on, if I can... See if I can show it, actually. It's actually so bad. Look how many views it's got. Like people just got filtered by this. This will probably look easy, by the way, because it's like, it's a pro doing it. But look how many things you have to do. Yeah, I remember being filtered as a kid doing this. It's too hard, man. But what's that? A salmon? What's a salmon? I mean, he's making good progress. Oh, slamming. Oh yeah, that's going in between the joint things. He still has... Okay, 180. He's still got to do a 180 and a 360. He's nearly at... This is a sweat, by the way, and he's nearly out of time. He's gonna run out. Dude. Dude. Look, let me move the camera. He had like 5 seconds left. If that hit like the 12, he would have lost that. And that was a sweat doing that. I want to see the comments. When the final boss is at the start of the game. Yep. I remember this tutorial forever. I had a group of 4 friends. Each of us could do something different. We gathered one day for a couple hours and we tried over and over to pass this insane tutorial. At some point, we managed to do it. We shouted so loud and jumped everywhere that my bro's father screamed at us to calm down. Lol. But we didn't care. We were so happy. Good old times. Yeah, it's... Teacher, the test isn't that hard. The test. Yeah, that game, like, has no swearing or anything and, like, no violence. So it's like, you know, like a kid could buy that game. And that guy, like, he sweated that and he only just made it. Brutal.
PlayStation had
Actual Dark Souls boss.
all of the big yearly franchises. NFL, NHL, FIFA.
Reddit moment, you, sir, have won the internet. Shut up. No one said that in the comments.
Skateboarding games were surprisingly popular at this time. The Tony Hawk series was topping the charts, and the release of the sequel elevated skateboarding to new heights.
I really did not like playing Tony Hawk on the PS1. I just did not enjoy it at all. I was so washed at the game. And then on the Xbox, I played Tony Hawk's Underground, where you can get off your board and throw, like, rotten fruit at people. Like, that was cinema.
The explosion in extreme sports led to imitators like Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX, and set the stage for similar games on the forthcoming generation. While Nintendo had the lion's share of mascot-led games, there were a few family-friendly titles that intruded on Nintendo's turf. The Spyro series had its third entry with Spyro Year of the Dragon, a cutesy 3D platformer.
Oh, man. There's so much soul in this image. There's so much soul.
And the popular Crash Bandicoot series had Crash Bash.
That game was way too hard. I remember playing that as well. I always played a Dingodile. You just could not beat that game. Like the later stages, the AI was just flat out cheating.
A party game in the Mario Party mold. In short, the PlayStation had more games suitable for more ages. The games were cheaper, cooler, and more varied than anything else on offer. It also helped that it was easier to find pirated games. Sony were newcomers to the console
Dude, 90s
scene,
ads were so... 90s ads for video games were so weird, man. It was like anti-drug PSAs or something.
Generation had installed themselves as king. And if that wasn't enough, they were preparing to unleash a devastating blow to their rivals.
Penis?
Meanwhile, the PC was doing quite well. While the console wars were brutal, computers had long since consolidated to IBM compatibles. The closest rival was Apple, who had been struggling for years.
Apple having games. I laugh. I swear they got like Team Fortress 2 like 10 years after everyone else got it.
And were only starting to make a recovery. As far as computer gaming was concerned, the PC was the only choice. And over the last decade, they had become a common purchase for the home. So with an install base in the tens of millions, there was a sizable audience for PC games. The biggest selling PC game of 2000 was The Sims, a life simulator game from the creator of SimCity. It was a unique game that appealed to an unusually wide audience, and it did rather well as a result, selling 6.3 million copies.
Unironically, I think The Sims sold so well because it is such a casual game. And also as well, like, people don't realize like how many women are like gamers as well. And The Sims just always appeals to women, like every time.
By 2002, there were many expansion packs and sequels that followed.
Someone just saw the Sims gameplay and they just said Project Zomboid. Rent-free.
Another hotly anticipated game was...
Next in chat, he's going to say how he's got 10k hours on it.
Action RPG Diablo 2, Blizzard's follow-up to 1997's Diablo. RPGs had long been a staple of PC gaming, and Blizzard had a great reputation at the time with the success of Warcraft and Starcraft. So, it's perhaps unsurprising that Diablo 2 ended up as the fastest-selling computer game ever.
I've never played a Diablo game, but I would much rather play this than any recent Diablo title. Like, that actually looked fun.
CRPG players were spoiled for choice, really. This year also had Baldur's Gate 2 from BioWare and Icewind Dale from Black Isle. Another classic PC genre was strategy, and one of the highlights of the year was Shogun Total War, a meaty slice of turn-based planning with 3D real-time battles and the opening entry of the Total War series. The popular
I'm going to tell my kids that was Shogun on FX.
Command and Conquer series had a return to form with Red Alert 2. After the divisive Tiberian Sun, the alternate Cold War
took out the
setting was
Pentagon!
welcomed,
They took out the
it wasn't quite as
Pentagon!
good as the original. 3D stealth action games were en vogue too, likely due to the popularity of Metal Gear Solid.
I really want to play Hitman Contracts. Oh no, Codename 47, that's the first one. I tried playing it, but the disguise system in that game is so broken. It's like you can get a perfect disguise, but then you jogged for 3 milliseconds and someone in like the next map over saw you do that, and now everyone's on full alert.
IO Interactive gave us Hitman Codename 47, an open-ended assassinator mod. And Looking Glass Studios released Thief 2: The Metal Age. A Hail Mary from a struggling studio which, despite critical acclaim and healthy sales, failed to save the company from bankruptcy.
Yeah, Thief was so good, man. Thief 1 and 2, absolute squeak.
One key advantage of PC gaming that the consoles hadn't yet usurped was online play. The internet was rapidly becoming more and
Thank you, Jimbo2, for the $22, man. Appreciate it. Thank you. Polska Gorom. I don't know what that means.
more popular, and for most people, the first, if not the only, device to be connected was the PC. Games like Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament, and Team Fortress Classic had installed themselves as online essentials, and this was the year that Counter-Strike made its debut. Backed by Valve and the Half-Life name, it found instant popularity. The round-based tactical FPS remained popular.
Wait, there was riot shields in the original CS? Oh my god. That just sounds so disgustingly broken.
Popular for years afterwards, topping play count rankings. The PC market was challenging, however. The sheer breadth of software available meant that many games, no matter how critically acclaimed, didn't sell particularly well. Take Deus Ex, for instance, a first-person action RPG that was hailed as the pinnacle of PC.
I gotta do a video on Deus Ex at some point, man. I have to. I have to do it. I have to do it. Oh, that game is so good. I still haven't finished it.
Gaming.
Yeah, I like how aiming in Deus Ex, like you'd crouch. You know, like in most games, FPS games, you crouch, your aim just instantly gets better. It took about 9.5 minutes in Deus Ex.
Festooned with awards and retaining a cult following today. It sold about 138,000 copies in the US in its first year. There was a lot of competition for shelf space, and the big boxes didn't help. The PC market had a lack of cohesion, and the consoles were starting to gain ground. Even PC stalwarts like the point-and-click adventure were struggling. The golden era of LucasArts was over, replaced with an endless string of Star Wars games. Many great PC exclusives of this era failed to gain the traction they deserved. Yeah,
I remember when LucasArts did so many good like point-and-click games, and then they just got slurped, and they were just doing Star Wars slop like forever.
Operative No One Lives Forever was a deft blend of camp 60s espionage with first-person stealth action, and it was very good. It received critical acclaim, with some reviewers comparing its innovations to those made in Half-Life. It sold 36,000 copies.
Can you imagine, like, back then, that's probably fairly decent. Now, that's a flop. That's a flop.
Of course, some flops were more deserving
No, not Daikatana, man. This game is awful.
than others.
I would love to play this game, because I've seen every YouTuber just attack it relentlessly, but I would need to play it myself to see how bad it really is.
Daikatana came out this year too. It was supposed to be the next big FPS from John Romero to exceed Doom and Quake. A promise the game couldn't uphold. Iron Storm forecasted sales of...
Dude, I met John Romero in Ireland when I was doing a meet and greet like 5 years ago or something. And then apparently his kids used to watch my content or something, and I was like, okay, that's pretty bad. And then he came over to me and he gave me like his own book that he signed. I don't have it here, it's back in the UK. But I've got a signed book from John Romero.
2.5 million, but its poor reviews scuppered any chance of a hit. It sold just over 8,000 PC copies in the US in its first few weeks.
That's brutal.
History remembers it as one of the biggest commercial failures of the era. There was just no room for mediocrity. The PC had more games available.
Who's John Romero? He's like the Jonesy guy in Fortnite. Yeah, it's like his friend.
Than any other platform, but players didn't have bottomless wallets. 7 out of 10 isn't good enough when the shelves are filled with 8s, 9s, and 10s. So the PC shelves are filled with 8.
I like how back then 70% was good, and now it's bad. Like, I swear the way game ratings have worked is like, if it's anything below an 8, it's trash.
9s and 10s.
Just because there is so much slop being put out now.
So the PC needed a new approach to selling games, one more flexible and with fewer overheads than retail. But until that solution arrived, AAA game development would become increasingly centered on the consoles. The worst was yet to come. The next generation of consoles had just arrived, eroding the PC's graphical advantage. The new hardware was ever more capable of handling 3D graphics, and provisions were made to satisfy the rising popularity of online play. The next gen was a threat.
Just old man face over and over. Oh, thank you, Ajax, for the 11 months. Ahoy's goated. No, he really is. I've watched like most of his videos. Always makes really good deep dives and stuff. Yeah, I'll die on this hill. I think the biggest graphical jump we've ever had is the PS1 to the PS2. Like the PS2 to the PS3, not much. PS3 to 4, even less. 4 to 5. Okay, but like there's never been more of a bigger jump than 1 to 2.
First to market was Sega's Dreamcast, launched the previous year. Sega had struggled during...
Sorry, no. PS2 to PS3 was also a big jump. I meant 3 to 4 wasn't. But 1 to 2 will always be the biggest.
The last generation, with a lukewarm reception to the Saturn and an alarming tower of failed add-ons for the Mega Drive. With Sony taking pole position, Sega couldn't afford any more mistakes. The Dreamcast was developer-friendly, able to port both PC and arcade games easily. It was powerful, came equipped with a modem, and the price was fair. It felt fresh and new, and had a fantastic array of colourful, interesting games. It had a good...
The SNES to N64 was a big jump. Yeah, that was a huge jump as well.
...start. Crazy Taxi was a perfect port of the arcade original. A fast-paced, zany 3D drive-em-up.
That game was so hard, man.
To their destination as quickly as possible. It was a must-have. It showed off the next generation's capability and tapped into a...
You remember when Simpsons always made like rip-offs of games? Like Simpsons had their own Crazy Taxi as well.
Cultural vibe in a way that few games can. The cel-shaded Jet Set Radio was similarly cool. An urban grind-em-up with jet-powered inline skates and a killer soundtrack.
Yeah, that game's so good, man.
Weirder still was Space Channel 5, a campy rhythm game where you repel an alien attack by matching actions. It's got a cool 60s sci-fi theme, and Michael Jackson even makes a cameo. Most baffling of all was Seaman, which released in North America this year.
I so want to play that game because it just looks like it just looks like a nightmare you'd have when coming down from Fent or something.
I'm not sure what drove Sega to make such weird games, but I'm glad they did. There was nothing else quite like it, and the Dreamcast needed a strong array of games to stand a chance.
To anyone that doesn't know, I'm sure most of you do, it's a game where you grow a fish that's voiced by Leonard Nimoy, who was Spock in Star Trek. It's so bizarre. It is an absolute fever dream of a game. It makes no sense. And he like talks to you through your controller and stuff.
Exclusives were a big deal, and while Sega may not have had Mario, the Dreamcast was the only place you could play Sonic Adventure. It was also home to Shenmue, which released in the West this year. An ambitious action-adventure life simulator game that was the most expensive video game ever developed at the time. It was good. So
yeah, I heard like insane things about Shenmue. I remember seeing Donkey's video on it like 8 years ago. And then they made Shenmue 3, I think, or Shenmue 2, like within the past 10 years. I think it came out like a while ago. And apparently it wasn't very good.
Certainly unique, but not quite good enough to recoup its costs, despite selling 1.2 million copies. Still, it was only on Dreamcast at the time, so it served as a pretty good incentive to adopt the system. The The PlayStation may have had Gran Turismo, but the Dreamcast offered a strong alternative in Metropolis Street Racer, a racing game with an open world and innovative kudos scoring system. In fact, the Dreamcast had most of the PlayStation favourites covered. There was a port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and it had its own exclusive version of Resident Evil with Code Veronica.
That is not a good thing to be saying, that you've got Code Veronica as an exclusive. I've heard nothing good about that Resident Evil.
There were a slew of sports games, with all of the major sports covered. Some major franchises were notably absent, but passable alternatives existed.
Look at that, guys. Look, we got our first in-game advertisement here. Very dark reminder of what was yet to come.
Honestly, the Dreamcast had a really solid library, especially considering how young the console was. But despite their best efforts, Sega couldn't instill confidence in the Dreamcast's future. EA weren't interested in developing for the platform, nor Squaresoft. The Dreamcast was good. Great, even. But it wasn't a PlayStation.
It's crazy how much the Matrix influenced all those ads as well.
Sony had built a very powerful brand over the last few years. In a time awash with bad decisions and risky purchases, the PlayStation was always a safe bet. And now...
It's so weird for me to think as well, these kinds of gritty, dark ads that you'd get, we're never going to get those again. We're never going to get those again. I feel like gaming advertisements and stuff now, everything is just so kind of safe and sterilized. It appeals to a bigger market, but it's so boring. You bring back these gritty ads, no one's going to care. No one will buy the product, but I still think they're so cool.
It was time for the PlayStation 2. The PS2 launched in March in Japan, October in North America, and the following month in Europe. Anticipation was sky high, with PS2 scarce on shelves and $250 million in revenue taken on the first day alone.
Pour one out in chat, boys, for midnight releases. Never getting that again.
1.4 million were sold in Japan in its first month, and 10.6 million consoles globally in its first year. Sega already knew they were in trouble, but the strength of PlayStation sales by the end of the year made it clear that they couldn't continue.
Okay, but who watches those ads? Boomers who still have TVs. Everyone else has ad blocks and buys games their favorite streamer recommended. Oh, no, yeah. No, literally. The landscape has changed so much now compared to back then. Because back then, it's the only two ways you could get advertisements, or three ways, was TV ads, magazines, and then billboards. That was pretty much it. But now it's now it's you've got these big companies and they've got millions of dollars in advertising budget. They don't buy a billboard or anything. They give it to streamers to play. It's like when Oblivion remastered. They shadow dropped it, right? No one knew it was coming apart from leaks. And the reason why they did that is because they knew all the streamers would pick up and play on it. I streamed that for 4 hours. I got 120,000 views on that stream. That's insane. There was obviously just so much hype around that game.
So soon, the PS2 was left standing as the only next-gen console on
Pyro is in the new PewDiePie video? What do you mean?
offer. It was the logical choice. It could play DVDs after all, and cost about the same as a standalone DVD player anyway. Unusually for a new console, it was backwards compatible with the original PlayStation, so you could carry on playing your favorites until something new arrived.
You know what's so funny? This shows how stupid I am. I went to Blockbuster as a kid, and we had a PS1, and I rented a PS2 disc from Blockbuster, thinking it would work on my PS1. And I tried it for like a full hour, and I was like, why is it not working? Why is it just not playing? Have I done something wrong? And I kept taking the disc out, and you know the cope where you go, you breathe on it, and then you clean it and stuff, thinking it's going to like make the disc work or something?
The compliment.
It's I think it literally, I think instead of me being stupid, it literally was just a poor cope because we didn't have enough money to buy a PS2.
Of launch games for the PS2 was a mixed bag. Enough to cover most genres, but the best was still on the way.
Thank you, Anto, for the 3. I'm jealous that you left the UK.
The annual
I mean, I haven't moved to Sweden. I'm probably going back at some point.
sports games were perhaps the most important for the launch checklist. EA had the NFL, NHL, and FIFA franchises ready to kick off the next generation. More interesting was SSX, a snowboarding title that scratched the same extreme itch as the Tony Hawk series. It was originally a Dreamcast title, but after EA lost confidence in Sega's console, development shifted to the PS2. Driving games were another important part of the PS2's launch lineup. The next Gran Turismo was a year away.
The PS2 and 3 were too expensive. Yeah, all the consoles are usually just mad overpriced on release. But we literally had, like, I mean, we weren't poor. Me and my family weren't poor growing up, but we weren't doing, like, well. You know? It's like I could probably... Like I spent so much of my childhood just playing demos, like demo discs over and over. Because it was, like, so much easier for my parents to buy me, like, a £5 magazine that had, like, 10 demos in it, as opposed to buying, like, one game that was, like, 40 quid.
So in the meantime, there were a few other next-gen options. Ridge Racer 5 was an arcade racer from Namco, praised for its tight racing and next-gen visuals, but criticised for a lack of anti-aliasing and limited content. Rockstar Games were gearing up to dominate the new generation and had 2 racing games on offer.
What's the deal with you and Up It's Not Jump? He had me cameo in some of his videos. I met him at Insomnia before that shut down. He's a really nice guy, by the way. Very, very nice guy. Like, the energy he gives off in his videos, he's basically exactly the same in person. He's really nice.
Ready for launch. Midnight Club Street Racing was a city-focused game with illegal races between exotic imports. Smuggler's Run was an off-road expedition with buggies and other rough-and-tumble vehicles. Fighting games were another popular genre. Tekken Tag Tournament was a spin-off from the popular Tekken series with a new team fighting mechanic. Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore was an...
I like how the fighting games were always 60 FPS first, because it was just like such little was actually happening on screen. It was so easy to render it out.
Updated version of the arcade game for the PS2, regarded as the best of the genre at the start of the generation. The new and exciting first-person shooter genre was starting to make headway on consoles, with the PS2 receiving a port of Unreal Tournament. Not a patch on the PC original, but it's hard to beat local multiplayer action. The exclusive Time Splitters was much better received. Its varied gunplay and characters meshed with better suited gameplay to the console.
I love that game so much. I never played the original, but I played the multiplayer for 2 and 3, and they're pretty similar. Like only... That game had such a weird cast of characters. Like, you could literally kill a Chinese man that was running, like, a Chinese restaurant, and then he'd pick up... and then he'd drop his weapon, which is like a brick, and you could just start throwing bricks at people.
For third-person shooting action, you had Armored Core 2, a mecha game by From Software. Dynasty Warriors 2 was a large-scale strategic hack-and-slash. The PlayStation had a reputation for great RPGs, but the selection on offer at launch for the PS2 was underwhelming. Best of the bunch.
So many weekends lost to playing Time Splitters 2? You mean weekends gained? That's memories, bro.
Which was Summoner, a 3D Western action RPG from Volition. From Software were also quite prolific, building on the success of their King's Field series. They had 2 games ready for launch, Evergrace.
Have you watched Totally Pointless TV? Yeah, he makes really good videos as well. I legit feel bad for him because he's doing video game reviews and he's British, so most people just comment saying he's like a Pyro clone. I think that's like really unwarranted.
And Eternal Ring, although neither were received particularly well. Dark Cloud was originally intended to be a launch title, but slipped to later in the year. A Zelda-style JRPG, it was the best of its genre in 2000, although this wasn't the highest bar to clear. With retrospect, the launch titles for any console pale in comparison to those released once it finds its stride, and the PS2 was no exception. But the basic needs were covered, and many great games were in the pipeline. With the massive hype surrounding the launch of the PS2, Sony couldn't fail to make an impression.
I think the PS2 saw the most amount of consoles, right? Apart from the Wii.
Competition, Sony had put themselves in the driving seat for the next generation. The PS2 was a capable system with 3D graphics that looked truly next-gen. From the messy, brutal console wars of the previous generation, a clear victor had emerged. Sega had been bested and were planning their exit from the industry. The 3DO and Jaguar, nothing but a distant memory. Nintendo remained, and...
Wait, apparently I'm actually in the new PewDiePie video. What?
To give something up. I don't know what it is, but for me, it was Photoshop. I used Photoshop, again, for 15 years. All the shortcuts, all my workflow, it's all baked into my brain. The way I use Photoshop, it's...
Okay. Oh, that's not a very nice picture. That's an old video as well. That's super old. Why would he use that example? Why would he use that example?
I don't think about it. It's just, here's the thumbnail. It's not beautiful, but I get the job done.
Oh my God. I remember when he was doing these thumbnails and you could tell he just gave into irony completely and he just made it progressively worse and worse and worse.
Unfortunately, Adobe is a garbage company and their software just won't run on Linux. A lot of artists are jumping ship. They don't.
Yeah, Adobe does. Adobe products are bad.
were preparing their next-gen competitor, but they'd been in the shadow of the PlayStation for a while, and with the PS2's head start, they had a mountain to climb. Even the PC was feeling the effects of the PlayStation's influence. Although the last decade had been great for the adoption of the platform for games, the lack of a standard configuration made it difficult to target.
Plug it in? There's nowhere to plug it in. There's no loose cable here. And it's like a really specific cable. I've got to like steal one and then just... I always leave it to just sit on the floor in the middle of the office.
There is something to be said for the simplicity of a console, and the monolithic hardware was starting to become more appealing for both consumers and developers. Microsoft knew this, and with their financial might, they saw an opportunity to challenge Sony's dominance in the console market. Essentially, a PC in a little black box, leveraging the rapid advancement of PC components into a standard configuration. As the PS2 launched in Japan, Microsoft announced the Xbox.
Bro, could you imagine if that's... Bro got the Xbox 720. Oh my God. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? What is that? The Xbox 720 and it's just blue. Like, what is that? Is it made out of shotgun shells? I love these old designs. The Xbox 720. Wild. That's just a PSP. That's a real issue. The Xbox 720. It never looked like that. It never looked like that. That is just a Switch. That is just a Switch. That's a Steam Deck. Oh. Wait, there's a gold Xbox? Oh, I remember there's a Simpsons Xbox, actually. Yeah, there it is. That is so expensive, by the way. There was only 100 ever made. There's like people on Amazon selling that for like 10K or something. It doesn't even look that good as well. I love when you got the Xboxes that would make custom sounds when you turn them on. Like there was a Gears of War one that made like a chainsaw sound. And there was like a Halo Reach one as well, I think.
Until next year. But Sony's monopoly was going to be tested, and Nintendo were no longer guaranteed
the yellow ring of death. Yeah, instead of getting a red ring of death, it's just yellow. It's just Homer going, "Go!"
in place. It was an exciting time. Technology was cool, and there was nothing but blue skies on the horizon. The arrival of a new millennium had brought a feeling of optimism for the future. We could cast off
battery levels low. You've only got 2 weeks left to use it.
Clumsy artifacts of the 20th century and embrace a new digital world. Mobile phones and the internet were starting to make a tangible impact on everyday life. We had SMS, we had MSN Messenger. The internet was young and bristled.
I don't even think I used MSN as a kid. I genuinely think when I started using like Facebook and stuff, that's like when they started to retire that stuff.
With opportunity. This was the future. And we were living it. Thank you very much for watching.
Did you guys know that the year 2000 was 25 years ago? Now you feel old. But yeah, drop a Hoya sub. I definitely recommend checking him out. He does like amazing deep dive videos. Like they're so good.